So, what are we here to talk about? We're here today to talk about the new rules that have been enforced for a little while, thanks to policy changes from Airbnb, and also some of the guest-facing topics that were unveiled during the Airbnb's big summer release. They do this every year, and it's always like a little earthquake in the industry. So this year, the summer release, which was all about services and experience and a lot of those fun guest-facing topics, how you can now Airbnb more than an Airbnb. This is moving Airbnb towards their goal of becoming, an everything app, an ecosystem that's offering more than just stays to guests. So really, I think it's this moment of them trying to position themselves to become more like Amazon, like a platform that people come to more than just a few times a year for their holidays, but constantly because they're coming back for different experiences, different services. That's great for Airbnb. That's more money, that's more revenue for Airbnb. But what does this mean for you as hosts? And what do these new policy changes mean? A lot of these new policy changes are really all about how Airbnb wants better control over the tech and service provider ecosystem that's grown up around it, and how they can also face some of the not so great press publicity and some of the challenges that have risen around the world from different governments, local tourism boards, that kind of thing. So we'll start today by covering some of the more compliance-focused issues like fees, communication, third-party apps, and then we'll get to some of the more fun guest-facing stuff as we go through. So boring compliance first. And there's a lot of words on these slides, which is not normally my vibe, but a lot of this is very precise language and we want to be very clear. But hopefully everything will be neatly summarized and there's some cheat sheets you can take away with you for the future. These slides will be shared with everyone who's joined and everyone who's registered for this webinar. So fear not, everything will be made available. So you don't have to taking screenshots or anything like that. You'll get it all as a follow-up. Lovely. So let's see how TouchStay can help you navigate and understand a bit of what's changed. So briefly what we'll cover, we'll look at how you can manage fees and guest payments so you remain compliant. We'll look at those rules for guest apps, portals, and just generally the access you can provide to guests, how to communicate with guests, and then what else is new in the summer release. So let's jump right in with the very exciting area of fees, payments, and compliance. So essentially, with some of these changes that have now come through, it's all about Airbnb wanting guests to know exactly what they're paying for. So some of this is not particularly new, but there has been a clarification that was provided by Airbnb and some of the wording that they're using. So essentially what they're trying to do with some of this clarification around fees and payments is that they don't want any more hidden extras or unexpected fees for guests. So it's all about making things simple for guests, less confusion, and keeping guests happy. So what has Airbnb said? What's new? So their wording is failing to include all mandatory fees in the pricing fields provided by Airbnb or causing the total price at checkout to be inaccurate is prohibited. Obviously, we don't want to be misleading any guests, and I'm sure this is what everyone has always been working towards, but they've now clarified specifically how they want this all to look. So what does this all mean? So first off, all fees that are related to a reservation must be included in the checkout and the final price that guests will see. So everything that a guest is paying for that relates to that reservation that they are making, all of the fees that are included in that have to be in that final page on the checkout when the guest clicks reserve. So what does this include? This includes utility fees, pet fees, extra guest fees, resort fees. You can read the list of them here. So that's everything that now has to be included in that final price. If a fee doesn't fall into the available pricing fields, so perhaps you have an unusual type of fee and there isn't a pricing field available in Airbnb or your property management software for you to put it in, then it needs to be included in the nightly price, so rolled up into that nightly price you're charging, and that has to be disclosed in the listing details. So if you have an unusual type of fee or the wording isn't clear, you can still include it in that nightly price, but it just has to be disclosed in the listing. So that's the first part. Next up, off-platform and fee transparency. So you might be thinking, all right, so Payments relating to the reservation, fine, that all makes sense. But what about payments for upsells and additional services? Here, there is a little less clarity, but we can break this down. So if a fee is related to a reservation, and Airbnb themselves give the example of pool heating, payment for that has to go through Airbnb. It can't be paid off platform. So if a guest has booked with you and they follow up through Airbnb's messaging center, and they say, hey, I'd really like to pay the 200 euros extra for the week for my pool to be heated. That's great. You can take that payment, but the payment has to go through the Airbnb reservation center. It can't be done off platform. So that's what they mean by off platform. It can't be done by a bank transfer just being sent to you or you having a chat with the guest off Airbnb. It has to be done within the Airbnb platform. So that's the first one. So hosts cannot collect any payments or fees related to the reservation outside Airbnb, except for some limited cases, some things around taxes. For example, a few weeks ago, I was in Rome. When I was checking in to I booked a place through booking.com, and the host came and met me, and I paid in cash for the tourist tax. I think it was €6 every night, and that's a tax that has to be taken in cash. Obviously, can't pay for that through Airbnb's platform. So things like that are required in local markets, that's fine to be done outside of Airbnb, because it's a tax and required by local law. But anything else related to the reservation has to remain within Airbnb. I know. Lovely. I'm just checking if we've got any notes from my co-host, but we're all good. Next, clear upsells like equipment rentals and experiences. These do not count as fees, so they're not included in the off payment platform rules. So don't worry if you've got someone that wants to rent bikes from you or other equipment from your property or something that you provide. That can be done off platform, and it can be done post reservation, of course, before the guest arrives, during the guest stay. That's still allowed. There is a little less clarity around early check-in and late check-in. That's some people are saying that falls into a fee that's related to a reservation, like the pool heating example I gave. And most people are recommending now that these payments should go through the reservation center, but it's not 100% clear. So we all need to be paying attention to new information that's coming from Airbnb for clarification around that point, because that's often one that's, the guest might ask for last minute. So it can be harder to take that payment through the Airbnb platform. So a little tip here, as you can see at the bottom of this slide, if you are software connected, and by software connected, I mean you're using a channel manager or a PMS, a property management software, then managing your fees should not be really that complex, and it shouldn't really change from what you've already been doing. That's because if you're using a PMS or a channel manager or any software that's directly connected to Airbnb's API, you should be fine, because the way all of those folks are connected to Airbnb, they're connected through their APIs, and therefore they've been vetted and approved by Airbnb. So if you are software connected, using a PMS or a channel manager, and you fill in your price fields through that PMS or channel manager, you should not face any issues. There are probably very few changes, or if any changes needed at all, but it's always best to double check. So log into your PMS or channel manager, have a look, make sure everything is up to date and making sense and following the rules as we've discussed. There's a lot there, and probably a lot of people thinking, well, what about this? What about this? So if you have questions, we'll get to those at the end. But hopefully this provides a little bit of clarification. Feel free to take a screenshot if you wish, but we will follow up with this. So here is a little cheat sheet. So we have listed the type of fee or service, whether or not it has to be paid in Airbnb or if it can be paid off platform, and some notes. So for example, cleaning fees, pet fees, resort fees, management fees, those have to be paid through the reservation center in Airbnb, or rather included in the fee breakdown, so included in that final price. So the details here, all mandatory and optional reservation related fees must be disclosed and paid in Airbnb. Nice, that makes sense. And the next one, pool heating, parking, that early check-in, late checkout. So even if these are optional, because the guest doesn't have to pay for these if they don't want to, because they are tied to the reservation and the stay, they do need to be processed via Airbnb, so on platform. What else is really interesting here? So when it comes to things like groceries, so if you provide groceries for the guests on the first night, having the fridge filled, babysitting is an example that kept coming up in my research. Those can be paid off platform because those are considered upsells, concierge services, and they're not specifically related to the reservation. So that's really the big clarification point here, whether things are related to the reservation or if they're when the reservation is made at that point on Airbnb, or if they're going to come later and the guest thinks of something that they'd like to add later. And then your classic upsells, bike rentals, tours, local experiences, they're not tied to the reservation. They can be offered and paid for off platform, which is probably what everyone has already been doing. Hopefully that provides some clarification. If there are questions, we'll get to those at the end. But here's your nice, neat little cheat sheet to take with you. Great. Moving on, guest apps, guidebooks, and portals. So one of the first questions we had right at the top of this before we started the recording was someone saying, oh no, I was really worried I wouldn't be able to use TouchStay anymore. Don't worry, you can. But let's get into the details. So yes, you can still use guidebooks. So what does Airbnb have to say here? Airbnb prohibits asking guests to create a separate account or register on another website besides Airbnb for the purpose of gaining entry to a property, or being asked to install a third-party app to gain access. Right, so basically what it's saying is you can't make it mandatory for someone to register on another app or a website for the purpose of gaining entry to the property. So you cannot make it mandatory for guests to have to download and use a specific app, guidebook, or other portal in order to gain access to the property. You can still provide those things. You can provide an app, a guidebook, or whatever portal you might be using. I hope everyone on this call is using, or on this webinar is using TouchStay, guidebooks, of course. So you can still offer those, but you have to make it optional for the guest to use them. So you can't lock a door access code behind an app, and you can't require guests to download that app and register in that app in order to get the door lock code, for example. Keyless entry and guest experience apps during the stay are allowed as long as they're optional for the guest to use. So you just can't make it mandatory or required for a guest to use any of these things. And a key point is the guest must not need to register or create an account in order to access what you're trying to share. It all has to be opt-in. So it all has to be optional, and the guest has to have the opportunity to opt in. It can't kind of be forced upon them. Now, one point here that's interesting is that additional registration of guests, so gathering guest information, is permitted where it's required for local compliance. For example, in Spain, there is a police check has to be done, and certain information about each guest has to be collected and registered. So that's okay to do because it's a local legal requirement, but that needs to be declared in your listing. So if you're in a country or an area where certain collection of guest information is required, that's fine to do, but you need to make sure that is declared in your listing. So if it's not, do go and update your listings and make sure that's in there. Lovely. I'm sure we'll get lots of questions on this, but don't worry, there's more to come. So now that you know that you can still use your guidebooks and your apps and whatever it is you're using to share information with guests or communicate with them, let's understand how you can communicate with them now, what's permitted, and specifically, what are the new rules around contact detail usage. So we're really talking about email addresses and phone numbers. So, this is the fun one. So this is not really completely new, as Airbnb stopped sharing the guest email a while ago, but there are some important changes here to take note of. Essentially, you're not allowed to ask guests to give you their email address. Unlike with as I mentioned before, with guest apps, guidebooks, and portals, you cannot limit access to these behind a request for email. So you can't give someone an app and require the guest to have to put in an email or a phone number in order to access the information that's within there. So essentially, soliciting guests for their emails using the Airbnb messaging system or email alias is not allowed. So breaking this down a little bit, so you're not allowed to ask guests for their email addresses, phone numbers, or other contact information. and that's for marketing, for future bookings, or any unrelated communication, which is quite sad. Because I would imagine that a lot of folks on here, we've done a lot of webinars in the past and education in the past about how to get guests' email addresses, because it's a really great way of staying in touch with the guest, signing them up for your newsletter, staying in touch with them, sharing more about your business with them, and hopefully being top of mind when they come to book their next holiday. So going forward, you cannot sign guests up for your newsletter if they share their email address with you, which is a bit of a shame. Some other points: if a guest specifically requests to communicate via another method, like if they offer you their email address or their phone number after the booking, you may use that data, that phone number or that email, to communicate with the guest, but you shouldn't use it for marketing or future solicitation. So this is really Airbnb trying to clamp down on hosts and property managers saying to guests, hey, thank you so much for your booking. It was wonderful to have you. Next time, come and book with me directly instead of going via Airbnb, and I'll give you 20% discount or whatever it may be. It's really them locking down their guests, who they see as their customers, and keeping them within their ecosystem and their platform. So they're trying to plug holes in the drip that is guests leaving as they see them as their customers, leaving their platform and booking directly. So that's not very friendly of Airbnb, but there we are. So there's a lot there. Again, a lot of details and some confusing wording. So a bit of a cheat sheet. So requesting the email and phone number of guests for marketing, you cannot do this. It's prohibited at all times, even after the booking. So asking someone to sign up to your newsletter or asking for their email address so you can contact them again about a booking or anything else is not allowed. Requesting the email address or phone number for legal requirements, that is allowed, but only if required for the stay. So if it's, for example, the example I gave earlier of it being a legal requirement in Spain, and that must be disclosed in the listing. Using contact information for your mailing lists or your newsletters, this is prohibited entirely for marketing or future outreach. So yeah, bit of a shame. Guests request off-platform contact. So if a guest contacts you and says, here's my phone number, can you please WhatsApp me? Or here's my email, please send me these details over email. That's fine, but only if it's initiated by the guest and not used for future marketing. So essentially, Airbnb doesn't want you to market to what they see as their guests after the booking. They want to lock those guests inside their ecosystem, but they still, of course, want to make it possible for you to communicate with the guests during their stay. So they're not saying that you can't talk to guests at all. They're just putting stricter limits around how you can develop a relationship with guests after their stay. So to summarize, a couple of things we recommend that you do if you're thinking, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm fully compliant with all of this now. So take a look at how you're collecting guest information across all of your channels, whether that's your website, the different booking channels that you're using, and just make sure everything's compliant. Obviously, we're only talking about Airbnb here, but it's just really good to check everything to make sure you know. Sometimes you might have set something up a couple of years ago, and it's always good to have a refresh. Ensure you're using opt-in only methods to stay in touch with your guests. So, for example, if you're sending them a touch stay guidebook, that's opt-in because they don't have to click on that link and they don't have to give you any information in order to access that guidebook, for example. So touch stay is nice and compliant. But if you're using other products, whether that be a guest portal, another type of guest app, make sure that the information you're providing is opt-in only for guests and they don't have to provide you an email address or anything else in order to access it. Look at your SOPs. Look at your payments and upsells and the different ways that you're communicating with guests, and just make sure that everything is following all of the lovely rules from Airbnb. So hopefully this has provided a bit of clarification. I'm seeing lots of questions coming through, so we will get to those at the end. And you'll also get all of these slides, so don't worry, you'll be able to read through this when you have your next cup of tea or coffee. But yeah, you're probably thinking, oh gosh, how can I get around some of this stuff? I'm not really sure where to start. Can I still use TouchStay? How should I use TouchStay? Well, there's some things that TouchStay have already existing, features that we've had for a very long time that are available to you to help make some of this a bit easier, or just to remove some of the fear or concern and make sure that you can be a confident host. So let me see. So the first tip I have, if you haven't already, is get software connected. So as I mentioned before, what does software connected mean? It means having your Airbnb listings connected to a PMS, a property management software, or a channel manager. So folks like Guesty, Hostaway, Lodgify, OwnerRez, Streamline. Why is this important? Because these businesses are partnered with Airbnb and generally speaking are approved by Airbnb. Because they give them access to their APIs. Therefore, and the API, if anyone's wondering what am I talking about, that's how information is shared. So that's how your listing information and the reservations made on Airbnb are pulled into the PMS, the property management software's back office. And that's where you log in and look at all your reservations and everything else. And then when you make changes in that PMS, it flows through, that information is pinged back into Airbnb, and it's just the communication between Airbnb and the property management software or other booking channel or thing you might be using. So basically, if you're using one of those, they have to be compliant with Airbnb's policies. So if you are using one of these softwares, most likely you already are compliant. And this is especially true when it comes to managing your nightly pricing and fees. So if you're worried and you're not using a PMS and maybe you're thinking, maybe if your business is growing, you're thinking, maybe I should be using a PMS, now is the time. This is a really good reason to be using a PMS because it gives you that sense of clarity and understanding that you are being fully compliant. So TouchStay is integrated with 17 PMSs. You can see the list of them on our website, and we're always adding more, which is great. And the good news about when you are software connected is using one of the integrations with TouchStay as well, is that these integrations make the guest phone number available. So it means you can have access to the phone number that's linked to each of your reservations, and you can then use our messaging assistant, Memo, TouchStay's Memo, to send text messages to guests, to share information about their trip, share the guidebook link, and keep guests engaged post-booking and during their trip. So you can drip information that is related to the reservation, to the stay, to guests via text message. It's also possible to send the guidebook link to guests and automate that process through the PMS integrations that we have. So if you're with a PMS, especially one of the 17 that we have an integration with, and you're not using that integration, now is a great time to get it set up. All of our integrations are very easy to go through. It's free and included in your TouchStay subscription, so there's nothing new you have to pay for. And it can be a real time saver, and it opens up a whole new, lots of new ways that you can communicate with guests, but still maintain compliance and still manage to have that nice relationship with guests. So when they turn up to your property, they know you, you know them, you've been able to build a relationship, but you've still followed all of the rules and not fallen afoul of any of these new policies. We also have a really neat feature called First Impressions. So this is a really neat little feature we have that makes it easy for guests to reach out for you. So it's a topic that you add to your guide that basically allows guests to give you a 5-star rating. So to rate what their first impressions are. So normally within the first 24 hours, you can send a text message to guests if you've got their phone number, and you can say to them, hey, let us know that everything's all right. Click the link here. That will open up the guidebook. They can give you a 5-star rating and they can leave you any comments. If you scan the QR code here, this will give you more information about how First Impressions works. But this is a feature that's used by a lot of TouchStay customers. And we have so many stories of people getting told of something that's gone wrong within the first 24 hours. there's towels missing, cleaning hasn't been done properly, there's no toilet paper, for example. And because the host was able to automate through using memo and first impressions, because they were able to automate that process and compliantly requesting that information from the guest, they were able to turn a negative situation into something quite positive, which is great. So this is a really nice way to give guests a way of getting in touch with you. We recommend, if you want to use this feature, that you position it near the top of your guidebook so guests see it when they're using it. Or, as I said, you can use Memo to send a link to this section of the guidebook directly to them. It's a really nice way of showing your hospitality and fixing a problem fixing something that's gone a little awry before it becomes a problem. One thing you do have to do, there is a little element of this where you used to be able to use the email address a guest would share with you for marketing purposes. Now you have to turn that feature off. And that's how you can still remain compliant whilst using first impressions. So this is a really nice one, and it's a great way of it's opt-in. Guests are coming to you with feedback and with a question. So it's a really nice way of balancing that communication with the guest within that first 24 hours when they're at your property and still remaining compliant. Cool. And one of the best things about TouchStay is we look like an app and we behave like an app, but it's not an app. It's a progressive web app. And what that essentially means is it's browser based. So the guest never needs to download TouchStay. You send the link to the guidebook to the guest, they click on that link and it lives in their browser. They have an option to save the guidebook to their phone as a widget, but it's not a download. So you're not asking guests to download anything. You're not creating a barrier between them and Airbnb. You're just sending them a link with lots of lovely information. So it's free opt-in access to TouchStay for your guests. So compliant there. It's very easy to share with guests because it's a link. No registration, no faffing around. And guests can then easily share that link with the other people that are in their guest party, which is great. And this is how you build a relationship with guests without breaking rules. Lovely. So a few tips and things to do to check your TouchStay guidebooks. So if you're already using TouchStay and you've been using TouchStay for a while, these are some things that you should check. And even if you're new to TouchStay, just give it a check anyway to make sure you remain compliant and don't risk getting delisted from Airbnb. So first, don't include the book again topic if sharing the guidebook links through the Airbnb messaging inbox. TouchStay also have a direct integration with Airbnb, by the way, through our partner Hospitable Connect. So we have some messaging templates set up where you can automate the sharing of that guidebook link. So if you're using that feature or if you're sharing your guidebook links at all through a PMS, those will end up in Airbnb. So just remove this topic if you've got guests booking through Airbnb. Remove any reference to direct bookings or reference to other OTAs or booking channels. Whilst, Airbnb can't really get mad at you for referencing booking.com or Vrbo, they might do. So it's always best just not to have it in there if you do. I'm sure most people don't, but it's always good to have those removed. The first impressions topic is a compliant way of letting guests get in touch with you as long as you turn off the email marketing opt-in. And a really nice tip and something that we've always talked about at TouchStay is the humble QR code. I love a QR code. They just make things so easy because all you have to do is scan it with a phone and then you've got everything you need. So leaving QR codes that link to your TouchStay guidebooks around your property is a really nice way of making it very easy for the guest to open your guidebook. And it means everyone that's coming into the property, if you've got a big guest group, they can all get access to your guidebook and connect with you. Lovely. So we're running short on time, so we'll breeze through this bit a little faster because we've done the important stuff and I want to make sure we have time for questions. So the summer release, services and experiences. So Airbnb with their big summer release and with the tagline, now you can Airbnb more than an Airbnb. So we're talking here about upsells, right? So also referred to as services and experiences in this context, these have become really important this year in the world of hosting, not only because they're a way of driving more revenue and in a landscape where booking volume is down, and rising costs mean margins are getting thinner and thinner. They've become more and more important, and now Airbnb has made them the big feature of their summer release. So what are we talking about? What are these experiences and services? So services and experiences, an experience would be a guest being able to book a private chef, being able to have someone come in and give them a massage, someone being able to come in and teach a yoga class at your property. And services are things like, oh, my brain is failing me, but I think you get the idea from the picture, and I want to breeze through this. So guests are really starting to think about experiences and services. So, your private chefs, your yoga instructor, the masseuse, and wanting to be able to add things like this to their vacation to make it a little bit more special. And if they've booked directly with you, they'll want these to come from you. But if they've booked via Airbnb, they're probably going to book them by Airbnb anyway. So that's why Airbnb has released this. They want to keep more people buying more from them within their ecosystem. So a guest isn't just going to book their holiday through Airbnb, they're going to book different experiences and different services at the same time. So that's a lot more revenue for Airbnb and happier guests because they're getting more experiences and things available for their stay. This does mean, interestingly, that, for example, now a guest can book a private chef to come to your property and you don't have to approve this. So this could put some hosts in a tricky position if something goes wrong, but that's a whole other topic for a whole other webinar. And there's already a lot of people talking about that across the industry, so you don't need my take there. But these are the experiences and services as we're discussing. So it's really upsells. That's what we're talking about when we say experience and services. It's upsells. So luckily, Touchstone makes it very easy for you to offer your own upsells, whether that's services, experiences, whatever you want to call them. And you can offer these from local businesses within your area. So not those that are being kind of forced or, aggressively put in front of your guests from big corporate providers, but those that are meaningful to your community and your local area, and make sense to your guests and can offer a much more authentic and hospitable experience than, just a generic upsell. So how does it work? Well, we have an upsell widget, and it allows you to showcase up to 20 products or services directly within your guidebook. So like local tours, welcome packages, that kind of thing. So guests can browse and purchase add-ons seamlessly. So that's additional revenue for you. And it's just a lovely way for you to offer more to your guests. Right now, let me give you a nice example, actually. Yeah, this is what it looks like in the guidebook. So here's an example from a UK-based customer there in the Isle of Wight. Here you can see they're offering a range of, they've called them booking extras, but they're upsells. So they have a welcome hamper, private dining, restaurant booking, lovely. So all of this is possible for your guests to access and buy directly from the guide. So no going to other places, no different portals and apps. It's all right there within the guide, which is lovely. One thing to consider, right now, only the order can be placed in the guide, but payment cannot be captured. But the ability to take payment directly through the guidebook is coming very soon. So that should be coming likely the end of Q3. So by the end of the summer, we should have that functionality. So keep your eyes peeled on our newsletter for when that comes through. So there we go. And if you don't have anything of your own that you want to offer, TouchStay partners with a number of what we call our experience partners. So if you don't have your own upsells, then you can borrow from some of our lovely experience partners. These are partners where we have a direct integration. So you can drop these offerings from these providers directly into your guidebook. So making it possible for a guest to book a transfer to the airport, for example, or to stash their luggage or book a private chef. That can be done directly through your guidebook. You can learn more about these specific partners by scanning the QR code here. This is a really nice way to offer more to your guests with very little effort for you. And with some of these partners, they offer a commission for every booking. So that's some nice passive income for you as well. So just another way that with TouchStay, it makes it easy to offer upsells to your guests. Lovely. So it's Q&A time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all of the questions. And my lovely co-host, Lauren, there she is. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, well done. Thank you so much for all of that very detailed information. We've been fielding a lot of questions since the changes happened a few months ago, but back in 2023, there were changes at Airbnb, and I think that there will always be changes in every OTA platform, VRBO, Airbnb, and it's important that we just work with them if we're sharing our properties on them, but also knowing that at the end of the day, it is your business to choose which OTA platforms you choose to list your properties on and how your business is or isn't dependent on those specific avenues. TouchStay serves you no matter what avenues you choose. We do have our product that offers all sorts of functions that you can turn on and off. And a lot of these questions are some are repeated, so we'll be going through them as quickly as we can. I've kind of been answering a few in the background when I can. But at the same time, I think at the end of the day, you can turn on any features that TouchStay has available to you. You can add your direct booking site, you can add your social media links, you can add different things if Airbnb does deem it off policy or they can reprimand you, that could look at they penalize you for a temporary amount of time or they completely penalize you from posting on the platform you're listing. So I do think this is where it is. The ball is in your court. We're trying to guide you in the best ways to continue sharing your TouchStay guidebook or sharing it for the first time ever, if you're just new to us, in the ways that are aligning with their new policy. That said, um, I answered a few questions on the side. A few of them were like, what happens if you're adding EV charging or pool or hot tub after they book? And based on what Emma's researched and shared with us today, it is to my knowledge and understanding that it will have to be processed through the Airbnb platform because it's related to the booking itself and the property itself. Whereas grocery delivery or setting up your fridge or charcuterie board at arrival isn't property specific. That's how it's considered a concierge upsell. So I hope that answers a bulk of those questions together, and we'll clear those through. But I'm going to let Emma jump in on a few questions while I just read through a few that she might know to answer right away.
Sure. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. There's a question from Pascal, and maybe I think around fees, and I think my language wasn't very clear. So essentially, it's saying that any fees that are mandatory that a guest has to pay, let's, for example, a cleaning fee, that has to be disclosed and included in the final price that the guest sees at checkout. So if it's mandatory, it has to be there. And if there isn't a pricing field available for it, you have to put that information in the listing and then include that up into, so it's wrapped up into the nightly price that the guest is paying. So I hope that answers that one a little bit. The wording is a bit tricky.
Awesome. I guess that relates to the taxes question that Renata is also mentioning in Italy, that it's based on the amount of guests that are staying. And you don't necessarily know that before the number of guests, but I do also presume that is where Airbnb would expect it to be fully laid out and described as you would accept the taxes per guest so everyone knows. And then obviously, if they bring more guests than originally intended, you would probably, my suspicion, have to charge them more for the fees that are due after that.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Lauren. We have a question from an anonymous person. It says, I have two properties. Why can I not add a resort fee in the fee area? So there could be many reasons. I don't know whether you're trying to do that directly in the Airbnb portal or if you're doing that through a property management, a PMS, so, or another kind of channel manager. So however you're managing that, either speak to Airbnb or speak to the PMS or channel manager to understand why you can't put that fee in, because there should be a field for that that's available to put that into. Lovely. A question from Penny Jones. Does EV charging count as equipment hire, or does this need to be done through the resolution center? So when I was looking into this, the ones that really stuck out as those that have to be included or paid for in platform, that would be parking was one that was mentioned. Pool heating was one that was mentioned. This one, it's best to clarify with Airbnb, or if you're using a PMS or another technology partner, to check with them, because it's not technically related to the reservation, but parking is one of those fees that has to be paid on platform. So parking, EV charging, would they fall into the same category? Maybe. So you can still offer it, but I believe that the payment for it has to be managed on platform through Airbnb. The guest can't pay for it off platform to you directly. But again, check with your PMS or the software that you're using and check for clarification on that with Airbnb, because EV charging was not one that I specifically saw in the research I was doing.
Awesome. I'll jump in here really quick. So Keys has said, what enforcement methods do we expect Airbnb to employ in applying these rather these rules. The rules are being done, and I'd say what to expect is only what we've learned internally from our customers. And we do believe they have someone or something deployed in their messaging inbox that is checking the links that are being shared. And as they're checking the links that are being shared, such as your TouchStay guidebook or any other link you're sharing, they are looking for that Book Direct website link specifically, or they are looking if you're marketing to them to book direct with you by requiring an email address or a phone number in order to access the details you're sharing about your property. What type of things can you expect are kind of where you could be delisted or you could be penalized or you could be temporarily suspended from the platform? This only came to light once again because we did have a customer or two that was flagged for their TouchStay guidebook having a Book Direct website link in it. Further than that, we personally haven't had direct conversation with Airbnb on that policy, but we do want to respect our integration with them and with all of our integration partners who are sharing your guidebook links through the unified inboxes into their platform. That also leads, though, however, to the question about having phone numbers. So Christina has asked, but the phone number is always shown after the guest books. Have they stopped showing it? They have not. But again, you can use this as Emma concluded through the memo SMS system. Usually you would need to have an integrated partner connected to that for everything to be fully automated. So again, we have 17 integrations right now and growing. So a few of you have written down rental ready and aways as things for our integrations managers to look into. But the phone number does show right now, but I will say at the late 2023, they did remove the proxy email address that had been passing through. So there's no saying that they may or may not remove the phone number in the future, but it is a vital piece of information. And just as other folks were saying in the chat, sometimes you have to email the guests or you have to contact them because they won't have Wi-Fi service driving to your remote location, or you need to give them step-by-step parking instructions. And that is where our guidebook can actually come in really handy. So if you share that guidebook link before they arrive, you can encourage them to download it to their phone. It actually works off Wi-Fi for photos and text and all of that information. And furthermore, you then are sending it directly to them and they are accessing you. You can still add your logo to a TouchStay guidebook. You can still add your brand colors. You can still add your face, your little Airbnb host face if you'd prefer instead of a logo. And to my knowledge, you can still encourage your guests to share on social media. So I think that there are still ways that you can build rapport and relationship with your guest, even without sharing the Book Direct link or remarketing to them.
Yeah, I think that's really critical, Lauren. So whilst it's become trickier to have that relationship with the guests, there still are ways to do it. And TouchStay is one of those really useful ways of being able to do it. We're very lucky. It's all worked out very nicely. But that, the point of TouchStay has always been that we're here providing a template and it's for you to fill in, show off your business, show off your personality to make that connection with guests. And it's so great that once the guest has it on their phone, they'll have those location instructions. So if you are in a rural place, you don't really have to worry about sending a PDF. If you have all of that information in your TouchStay guide, you can still share that in Airbnb, in the messaging platform, whether you're automating that or doing it manually. So there is still that option there to get that information through to guests.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm trying to scroll through. We do have a lot. We will try and document these and answer them in our follow-up email as well that we will send out to the recording. In regards to the QR codes, I see a few questions. I might not be able to say I answered live to all of them, but we do offer a QR code for your guest guidebook. Now, if you have that QR code in the property, it is the same link that you're sharing through the platform as well. You could, however, create an additional guidebook that you put a gate on with a contact collection feature, as we call it, in your property that is specifically just to remarket. You could even say, instead of someone mentioned StayFi, I'm not sure the rules on StayFi because I don't know the product well enough to tell you that. But with TouchStay, you can put your gated email address that says this is being used for marketing purposes, specifically only in the home. But you have to make sure you don't share that link in Airbnb. That is where you can be penalized. Now, technically, I'm not sure. There might be some gray matter in the air there. I'm not 100%. But if you walk into a property and you have like a branded mint package or you have a branded frame with your QR code that says, hey, you want to stay in touch and join our marketing, maybe you can do that. I don't know. Emma might say I'm in trouble for saying that, but you could possibly use that too if it's a separate guidebook from the property guidebook shared in Airbnb.
Yeah. I will say no more. No, your point on StayFi is interesting. So that was one of the first products that I thought of when I thought, oh gosh, what about their business? And we know Arthur from StayFi is a friend of TouchStay. We know him very well. And StayFi is opt-in. So StayFi, for anyone who doesn't know, is access to the Wi-Fi. So when a guest arrives at the property, they're sent the link, and it's they have StayFi on their phone. It's if you want to access the Wi-Fi, just pop in your email address, and you'll get access to the Wi-Fi. And that is opt-in. That is the guest opting in. It's not mandatory to have Wi-Fi, and you're not blocking the guest from accessing the property. It's something that you're offering, and it's not related to the reservation. So you might think, well, is it, isn't it? But Stayfar, of course, have done the research, and they're, they I think they also have some kind of partnership with Airbnb, or I may be making that up. My brain is frazzled from all of the reading. But Stayfy is a product that is still able to work and is compliant with these new rules because it's opt-in. So that's key, really key thing to remember. So maybe, Lauren, if there is a separate guidebook that's just for the marketing and staying in touch, maybe because it's opt-in, there's some flexibility there.
That is a
Lovely.
very good, valid point. And thank you for doing so much thorough research. It's very helpful for me as well to learn from your research. A couple questions at the end, and then we'll scroll back up. Can you still put your email or phone number on touch stay guides and not be flagged by Airbnb?
Mhm.
Absolutely. If your guests need to get in touch with you and just the Airbnb OTA platform isn't enough, they need to be able to contact you in case of an emergency or in case of anything else. And once they open that door to you or you have a personal conversation, where that leads, no one really knows. I think it's just what you're sharing specifically in the guest communication platform of the Airbnb, where they booked as a customer of Airbnb to your property as a customer of you, is where we have to just be extra careful for now.
A nice question. How might TouchStay help hosts stay in touch with guests outside of Airbnb? So we've mentioned QR codes. We've mentioned you're able to send messages to guests using Memo. And as Lauren just mentioned, the guest can contact you directly through the guide. So currently on the cover page of the guide, and when the link is first clicked by a guest, they have the contact information that you put in there. So they can open up WhatsApp, they can give you a phone call, they can send you an email. So we make it possible for the guest, for you to stay in touch with the guest and remain compliant, but also for the guest to get in touch with you, which is probably the most important thing because it's always when the guest needs something that they want to be able to easily get in touch with you, and we still make that very easy. So, and that's all separate from any booking platform or OTA. So yeah, there's no issue there with the guest being able to get in touch with you.
A few questions. How does Airbnb monitor you when you're messaging off platform if you have the email or phone number? I don't think that they legally can. I don't know if there's a way around that or if they can see that someone booked with them and then with you. I do think that this is them honing in on their policy that kind of has already always been in place, but maybe just enforcing it a little bit more so. So I do think, again, it's just a matter of whether you choose or not to choose to be able to do that on your own, and just making sure that if you do choose to do anything off platform or send a book direct link or ask them for their contact collection and you're sharing on Airbnb still, it will still be a part of that. Now, there's also a question here of what can we define as marketing? Does it include reminding them to come back and offering a discount? 100%. And then that also leads to social media. I mentioned putting your social media links. I'm a huge fan. And I think that if you build your social media presence, whether you have one or 1,000 properties, it is so important today to revive your direct bookings, not necessarily through Airbnb, but in general. I think that especially with the new algorithms, it's important to put yourself out there and get yourself out there more. But yes, it all does count as marketing at the end of the day. Can you still share social media links in your Touch Stay guidebook? I say yes. I could be wrong. Yes, your social media usually leads to your website. That is your direct booking link. But again, I don't believe that anyone's going that far clicking into your guide. Again, I could be wrong. But maybe just make it fun. Make it a competition. Tell your guests, like, tag us on social and use this hashtag and create some drum up information. And I think that'll be helpful for you and building momentum too. We only have a few minutes left. We're definitely not going to be able to get through all of these.
No.
I'm going to let Emma share. I think she might have a slide
Yeah,
with a QR code to join our
I
Facebook group.
do. I
And
do.
so I would highly encourage you all to join there. We can absolutely keep this conversation going there, maybe answer some live Q&A, or maybe even make another
Yeah.
follow-up.
So we still have, yes, we still have around 50 questions still to go. Oh my goodness. So a few things here. We discussed already that if we had lots of questions that still needed to be answered, we would do a follow-up session. So we're planning to do a follow-up kind of live session in our Facebook group. So if you want to join in with that and be notified when it's going to happen, you can scan the QR code on the right here, the one with the orange arrow, and that will take you through to our Facebook group. It's free to join, of course. There's more than 3,000 hosts, property managers, and all kinds of folks from the short-term rental industry in there. We don't just talk about Touch Day, we talk about things like this. So if you want to come and join us, we'll be doing a session probably next week. It'll be me, and hopefully I'll rope Lauren in, and we'll be back to answer these questions, and we'll collate them as well because we definitely have some repeated questions here. And the other QR code, if you want even more learning and information, we have here you can download our guest communication study, which came out in 2023. It's still full of really useful information about how to communicate with guests, and it speaks quite specifically about text messages and the importance of text messages. So while you still have the guest phone numbers, and you can use Memo, our messaging tool, to speak with guests. This is a really nice way to understand how and when to be dropping information to your guests, but in a way that is still, of course, compliant with the new rules. So I'll leave these QR codes up here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We've talked about a lot, and there are still lots of questions to answer. So we'll either do another session of this again, maybe when we're all in back to school mindset in September, but we'll definitely follow up next week with a Q&A session. And everyone who's been here will get an email follow up with all of the slides and everything, and the recording of this session as well. And we'll decide on a date to do that live as well in the Facebook group, and we'll give information of that too. So thank you all for joining. It's been a whirlwind through the fun world of Airbnb. But yes, thank you. And thank you for your engagement and questions. And we'll speak to you all again soon.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you, Emma, so much for your time
Thank
and
you,
for all of
Lauren.
the due diligence that you've done. It's always a pleasure to host alongside you. Thank you all for joining us today. We will see you in the Facebook group.
See you there. Thanks. Bye. Right. How do I close this?